All right. Hello and welcome everybody to Forever is a Long Time. This is the introductory presentation about the Kettle Moraine Land Trust, who we are and what we do. My name is Greg Reisky, and I'm the Executive Director at Kettle Moraine Land Trust. And it'll be my pleasure to guide you through this primer to land trusts, specifically the Kettle Moraine Land Trust. We're headquartered in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and we operate throughout the Walworth County region, focusing particularly on the southern Kettle Moraine area. We're in the business of preserving natural heritage, and that means recognizing and honoring the past while protecting it into the future. So the subtitle of this presentation is Conservation into the Future. We're really about transcending time. But I'd like to begin with the question of what a land trust actually is. For those of you who may not be familiar with the concept, a land trust is a nonprofit organization. We are recognized under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, which means that we are eligible to receive charitable donations that may be tax deductible. We are led by a volunteer group of board of directors, and we're not a governmental agency, which means that we are not supported by tax dollars. Instead, we receive our funding, our financial support, through members, donors, grants by way of foundations, possibly endowments for specific purposes. Well, one of the key things that I want to make sure I point out is Kettle Moraine Land Trust is nationally accredited by the Land Trust Accreditation Commission. And that simply means that we have demonstrated that we consistently operate within a stringent and rigorous set of national standards so that our performance and accountability is assured. So let's take a look at what we do at Kettle Moraine Land Trust. A conservation organization, a nonprofit, but what does that mean? How do we go about achieving our mission? Well, land protection is at the core of what we do. And there are a couple of different ways that we do that. One is through what we call fee title acquisition properties. These are properties that we actually own title to, and we maintain them, manage them, operate them as public preserves, nature preserves, conservation areas, typically open to the public for the benefit of the whole community. But we also use a legal instrument known as a conservation easement. And we hold conservation easements on properties that are owned by private parties. So we do not own the land, but we ensure that that land is protected from development or certain other uses in perpetuity. That's a really significant concept, and it still amazes me to think that, we're in the forever business. When we protect land with a conservation easement, that easement protection survives the ownership of the property. It is connected to the deed and it is transferred from one owner to another over time. And it cannot be extinguished except in the most extreme circumstances and only with great legal effort and some difficulty. It is an extremely rigorous level of permanent protection to the land. But it's not enough just to preserve land in order to maintain biodiversity and provide healthy habitats and functioning ecosystems. We're engaged in ecological restoration, which is typically focused on vegetation management. Overall, natural areas management is the method by which we mitigate some of the stressors that affect our natural areas. We enhance the native biodiversity of the site. We ensure that habitats are supporting native wildlife. And it's not only vegetation management, it may require managing the hydrology of the site. It may include the restoration of key ecological functions that may have been withheld from the land historically. A good example of that would be prescribed fire. Most of the landscapes in our region naturally burned periodically, and returning fire to the landscape is one of the most effective tools that we have at our disposal to restore and manage these natural areas. Our stewardship efforts extend beyond the properties that we own. For example, we are engaged in collaborative support with other agencies and organizations. We'll go into a little bit more detail about that in just a bit, but suffice to say that stewardship is the adoption of a property by a caretaker who does not own the land. So for example, properties that may be owned by the state of Wisconsin may be managed by us in the role of steward. We don't own the property, but we take care of it. And certainly we're engaged in educational programming. I think it's very important that an informed public be able to understand and love a natural area if we're to ask them to protect it and to work with an organization that is engaged in ecological restoration and land management. So our educational efforts are part of our general public outreach. Again, I feel that once you understand and love a natural area, you're willing to commit to it. But you're not going to understand it until you can educate yourself about it. So public education and outreach are key components to our success. So let's take a look at some of our preserve properties, what we call our fee-owned lands. And we'll start with the Peterson Island Woods Preserve. It was named for Gerald Peterson, who was one of our founders, president of the organization for quite a number of years. He retired from our board of directors not long ago and retains a position of director emeritus. Jerry Peterson was instrumental in establishing our connection to the Island Woods Preserve, which was the first property that came under our protection. It's situated in the Lauderdale Lakes area, north of Elkhorn, on Oak Park Road. It contains 40 acres of dry mesic oak woodland. There is a trail that extends from the trailhead that you see here depicted in the photograph, and that trail bridges from Oak Park Road to South Shore Drive. Now, we've also installed a new trail parallel to Oak Park Road that links up with the Three Kettle Ridge Trail. It takes the name Three Kettle Ridge because this particular trail follows along the upper rim of three separate kettles, which are glacial depressions that occur in the mound-like hill of the moraine. And here's a view of Peterson Island Woods as seen from Middle Lake in the Lauderdale Lakes. Again, it's high ground, a nice dome hill. All of this is ice contact landform. These are glacial land structures. Moving on to Jackson Creek Preserve, which is just south of Elkhorn, along the eastern edge of Highway 67, where Jackson Creek flows from east to west on its way to Delavan Lake. This particular site is 34 acres in extent, and as you may imagine, along the banks of Jackson Creek, it contains a lot of wetland species. So we've got Sedge Meadow as one of our plant communities, and also a fen community. And a fen is a peculiar kind of wetland that is typified by a flow of groundwater, typically calcareous, high in calcium, high pH, and host to an unusual suite of plants. And here you can see some of them. The splash of blue across here, this is the small fringed gentian, Gentianopsis virgata. It occurs in some of the flat areas a little bit uphill from the slopes of the creek side. Closer into the wet areas, spotted Joe pieweed, here the purple flower at the bottom, Eutrochium maculatum. Whole fields of it there. It's beautiful in the late summer. The fen betony species is in the Scrophulariaceae family and the snapdragon family, Pedicularis lanceolata, again a fen denizen. Turtlehead, here you can see how it gets its name. The flowers, somewhat hooded, look a little bit like the head of a turtle. Grass of Parnassus, Parnassia glauca, another true denizen of the fen. And then here in the upper right-hand corner, we've got sneezeweed, Helenium autumnale, beautiful yellow autumn flowering plant. So wonderful flora at Jackson Creek Preserve. Now moving to the west to Turtle Creek Preserve. This is along Highway M, and it's adjacent to the Turtle Creek Wildlife Area, which is one of the Department of Natural Resource properties. A state agency owns the adjacent land. But we've picked up 13 acres abutting the wildlife area, so it's contiguous with that and provides an extension of it. And this area too is a wet area with Sedge Meadow and stream corridor. And here you see a beautiful photo of one of our willows in flower in the very early spring. Also at Turtle Creek Preserve, some other calcareous types of flowers, skunk cabbage, Symplocarpus fetidus, which has the distinction of being the earliest flowering of all of our native plants. It actually will create enough heat to push its way up through the snow and begin to bloom as early as February. Another spring flowering marsh plant, the marsh marigold, Caltha palustris, with its showy yellow flowers at Turtle Creek Preserve. Moving to the northeast corner of the county, our Beulah Bluff Preserve is a small site that has a remarkable diversity of plant communities, mostly due to the fact that it's got some relief to its topography and some variation to its soil types. So it's situated west of Lake Beulah and east of Beulah Bog. It's nestled between other natural areas, part of a larger corridor. We established a new trail there about a year or so ago. So it's got a parking area, a kiosk, an observation platform. It's a user-friendly sort of site to visit. And it is situated at an address on Bakavi Way along Beulah Heights Road. So the Kettle and Came topography is similar to that of Island Woods, in that you've got a dome hill with kettle pockets within it. So we have oak woodland, oak savanna, and gravel prairie, all present on this compact site. And here again, you can see some of the flora On the left, you've got the cream gentian, Gentiana alba, another one of our autumn flowering species. Here you've got in the lower portion, the orange flower is butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. It's an important host plant for monarch butterflies and provides nectar to a variety of other pollinators. And growing with it here, just to its left, is lead plant, Amorpha canescens. And both of these plants are dry loving prairie plants. They like a well-drained soil, unlike the cream gentian, which likes more moisture. But again, we have the variety of topography, so we have the variety of species. And not only the sunny prairie species here, but we've got a couple of woodland species of note on this page. Bellwort, Uvularia grandiflora, and round-lobed hepatica, Anemone americana. And these are both woodland or savanna flowers. So they prefer a little bit of dappled sunlight with shade rather than the full sun of the prairie. And here is a view of Beulah Bluff from across Lake Beulah. The photo was taken on the grounds of the Society of the Divine Word Catholic Seminary, just across the lake. So similar to Island Woods, you've got a dome hill situated next to a glacial lake. But now I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the easements that we hold. And we'll start with a brief description of the Bennis property in town of Whitewater. 176 acres. It includes oak woodland that is adjacent to the Kettle Moraine State Forest, along with the savanna restoration that the property owners had instigated a few years ago, and that's a work in progress. We applaud that work. It's got stream corridors. There are 2 cold water trout streams that find their confluence within this property. And then all the associated wetlands with those stream systems, sedge meadows, remnant wet prairie. But the dominant feature of the land is the farm. It is in active agricultural production today and will remain an active family farm in perpetuity and will not be subdivided or developed. So sustainable agriculture is an important aspect of what a land trust does here in our region. So protecting working family farms is as important as protecting our natural areas and restoring them to full function. Our North Lake easement is also near Whitewater and features 2 properties along the shoreline of the lake. A nice variety of plants, again, due to the change in elevation, a fairly steep slope running down to the water. So you've got wetland plants down on the lake border, and you've got upland savanna and prairie near the top of the hill. The Hartranft easements, there are 2 in East Troy. One is set aside for agricultural purposes, actually 2 separate parcels with a road running between them, but both dedicated to agricultural production. But there's also a natural area easement on the property, and that covers an area of oak savanna, and that's the site you see pictured in the photograph here. And it also includes a naturally occurring pond within that savanna setting. And then finally, our Lauderdale Lakes Country Club easement. Yes, we hold an easement on a public golf course, but that means that that golf course will remain open space and not be subdivided or developed. But importantly to us, adjacent to the golf course, along the shores of Don Jean Bay and the Lauderdale Lakes, are a series of wetlands that are protected by this easement as well. So we manage the natural areas that run down to the shoreline there. And as you can see from the following slide, we have a nice variety of native wetland plants that occur in that easement. So photo on the left, we have monkey flower, Mimulus ringens, growing here with common bone set, Eupatorium perfoliatum. And then here on the right, blue vervain, Verbena hastata. And there's a rich variety of wetland plants that occur along that area. Now, our partnership efforts, our collaborative stewardship. For the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, we have assumed stewardship of two of their properties. One is the Beulah Bog State Natural Area on Stringer's Bridge Road near East Troy. Again, it's not far at all as the crow flies from our Beulah Bluff Preserve. And the Beulah Bog site contains a just stunning example of a quaking bog, tamarack bog, with all its attendant vegetation. Lots of rare plants occur in that highly acidic wetland environment. We also adopted the Army Lake Oak Woodland, which is adjacent to the Army Lake Public Access Site. It's a boat launch, but the DNR has fenced off an area of exceptional quality oak woodland on that property, and Kettle Moraine Land Trust has adopted that site and will be conducting stewardship activities there. And then for the Walworth County Parks, operated by the Department of Public Works in Walworth County, we have adopted two parklands. Natureland Park at the southern edge of Whitewater Lake, which features bubbling springs and seeps, fen community, oak upland woodlands, and again, a variety of habitats in a variety of different settings. And we've also adopted the Price Park Conservancy, which is east of Elkhorn and has hundreds of acres of woodlands and restored prairie. And we also partner with private parties. I mentioned the Society of the Divine Word. The Divine Word Seminary, which is depicted in the photograph in the upper right, is on the shores of Lake Beulah. Now, this particular area of the photograph is away from the developed seminary complex, but is included among the holdings of the seminarians. And it is essentially another oak island that is surrounded by marsh and other wetland, tamarack bog and the like. But because of its relatively isolated nature, it was never plowed, and if it was grazed at all, it would have been only lightly. And that means that it has a relatively intact ground layer vegetation, which is rare to come by these days. So we have been conducting volunteer restoration work days on the property. We conducted a prescribed fire on the property last fall. And we are very pleased with our partnership with the seminarians to be able to help them manage this precious natural area. And then in the lower right, you see a prairie remnant restoration, actually, at the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge. Now, Hackmatack was a refuge that was established in 2012, and it spans the county or state line between Wisconsin and Illinois. This particular tract is in Genoa City in the southeastern corner of Walworth County. And every year, Kettle Moraine Land Trust partners with another land trust in Walworth County, Geneva Lake Conservancy, and we conduct what we call Harvest at Hackmatack. We do it in the fall, and we collect seeds from native prairie plants, all under the aegis of Gathering Waters, a consortium of land trusts in Wisconsin, under a series of events that they call Land Trust Days. So it gets statewide attention, and we draw in volunteers to assist with seed collection. That seed is then turned over to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for their ongoing use in restoration within the Hackmatack Refuge. A little bit about our outreach and education work. We try to conduct public events that are informative, educational, and entertaining. So the photo on the left is a gathering that we had at Northwind Perennial Farm, and fellow in the red shirt, Roy Diblick, is one of the owners of that growing center, and he is addressing a crowd of our guests about the use of native perennial plants in the home landscape. To the right, there's a photo taken at our office with the group of high school students from Elkhorn Area High School following an outing that we had at our Turtle Creek Preserve, an opportunity for service learning where students in AP biology and AP environmental science come together to do a little bit of service work and learning out on the land. Here on the left, we have a gathering at our Island Woods Preserve, Oaktoberfest, sort of a festive gathering where we had food and beverage as well as guided hikes through the preserve. And on the right, you see one of the field trips, one of the educational programs that we led at the Natureland Park for the Walworth County Department of Public Works. We're also involved in other regional efforts. For example, the Oak Ecosystem Recovery Plan, which is covering oak savannas and other oak habitats throughout northeastern Illinois and southeastern Wisconsin. And it's important to note that only 17% of our original oak timber lands remain intact. So we've lost 83% of the oak coverage region-wide. And about 70% of those remaining acres are in private hands. So public agencies can only protect so much land, and this is where land trusts come into play. We partner with individual property owners to help them manage the ecosystems that are part of their holdings. And oaks are of particular concern because they're not reproducing well in the wild on their own at most stations. And maybe we can do something about that. Oak decline is afflicting many areas. We're losing our older oaks, and as noted just now, they're not reproducing well. So you see the photo on the right, it's a young sapling oak, and it's got a cage around it. Well, this is an oak that we planted on one of our preserves, and we put up this little bit of caging or fencing to protect it from deer browse and other small mammals that may want to nip it in the bud, so to speak. So it's a concern because our ancient oaks are not protected, not unless they are under protective ownership. But unlike, say, wetlands, which are broadly regulated at the federal and state and local level, our oak remnants are not protected by law. So we are looking to encourage various jurisdictions to instigate oak protection where appropriate, so that we do not lose the ancient members of our community that are so emblematic of the natural areas where we live. So these proud ancient oaks are relics of the past and a symbol of hope for the future. And Kettle Moraine Land Trust is doing everything we can to ensure that there is a place for the oaks, there is a place for the pollinators, there is a place for people to learn and recreate, and that there is a place for all the members of the community that work together to ensure a functional system that serves the good of all. So thank you very much. We encourage you to join us, to support us. You can find us at kmlandtrust.org. We welcome volunteers. We welcome contributors with ideas, with financial assistance, with sweat equity. Come work with us. Thanks very much.